It's really nice to see you all. And today we have a guest lecture first, and afterwards we open the discussion with a panel talk. I think I would like to start off with explaining a little more how this panel talk and guest lecture came about. This is a project called the Creative Calendar. And it started because Amphi noticed some students that were eager to know a little bit more. And so they started off the Creative Calendar. It's been a program, now we're on the 7th week. And every week we invited over 7 guest lectures, workshops. And they asked us as a study association, the New Mode Collective, to compose it. And until so far, it's worked out great. We had a lot of show-ups and a lot of people that really enjoyed it and had some inspiring insights. And I'm very proud to be able to say that this panel talk and guest lecture is part of it. So yeah, let's start. First, I would like to see and ask a little bit who is in the audience today here. So can I see some hands for all the Amphi students? Nice, a lot. And also I saw some other faces. Maybe are there any people working for brands or fashion brands here? Nice, thank you for being here. And just a wild guess, maybe someone from an NGO or a non-profit. Okay. All right, well, let me introduce you. Our guest lecturer. Her name is Dr. Katia Dayan Vladimirova. She's a senior researcher at the University of Geneva. She holds a double PhD in climate ethics and politics. And she's the founder of the International Research Network on Sustainable Fashion Consumption, which holds over a network of 120 researchers from all over the world. So please give it up for Katia. Oh wait, did you test it now?
Shall we try it? Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I feel like God. Yeah, it works. So for the slides, I will to have a clicker. We'll move on here.
Fabio, could you help me? Oh, there we go.
Just tick tick. That's okay. Hello everybody. It's a huge pleasure to be here. I am very grateful for the leadership that Oyunaa showed in inviting me here and all the team behind with whom we had really nice dinner yesterday of the Student Association. Thank you guys for inviting me, for being open to this conversation, which is not an easy one. Some people say that it's a radical take on change. Others never heard about it. So I think it falls somewhere in between. To me, this conversation is about a much needed change. Good? So I'm really excited to talk to you today about post-growth fashion. You'll hear words like degrowth and sufficiency and reductions and stuff that I sometimes am afraid to say in policy corridors or in front of brands, but this is really, really needed. And this conversation comes from mostly academic circles, but it needs to be expanded. It needs to spill over. It needs to go into areas where people are taking decisions today, where people are deciding for the new business ventures, where people are deciding for new priorities to advocate for. So this is my QR code for LinkedIn in case if anybody wants to connect. Very happy to do so. I post quite a lot on social media about post-growth as we go, as we are developing and talking about it. As Oyunaa mentioned, I am a founder of the International Research Network on Sustainable Fashion Consumption. So if you are focusing specifically on consumption research in your work somehow, do reach out. We're happy to have new members. We also have some nice members, wonderful people from Amsterdam as well. I'm also a founder of an award-winning startup called Well Rounded, which is a sustainable underwear for the whole family, made in Portugal out of cotton grown in Greece, in which I'm trying to really pilot, more so as business, I'm treating it as a pilot, as an experiment. Can we really build a circular fashion brand that would be entirely, limited and only sold in Europe and made in Europe and then recycled in Europe? So there's an experiment. You can also check it out online to see more. I'm the author or co-author of 3 reports that came out last year in 2022. From Left to Right, Unfit, Unfair, and Fashionable is a report that we wrote with Hot or Cool Institute that made quite a big splash. Hot or Cool is a think tank based in Berlin, and we've calculated things like what are the reductions that are needed for the fashion system, including not just for brands or country scale, but for people, individuals, personally, how much should we reduce? And for example, we figured out that we have the right to buy, let's say, no more than 5 new garments per year, which was a number that really took off and attracted a lot of attention. The second report in the middle is called Fashion Futures 2040. We co-authored it with 15 co-authors from around the world, from the network. It was great fun, and I will be presenting a little bit, some snippets from that report throughout this presentation. And on the right is the report that I wrote for the city of Geneva, in which we did an analysis of existing ecosystem of fashion initiatives related to sustainability in the city and how the city could actually improve their work and help them. So I'm active at different levels, policy level, advocacy level, research, of course, and public speaking is part of my agenda, of course. There are 4 main parts to this presentation. First, I will walk you through what degrowth is and what's the actual point. My overall purpose today, you guys, is to give you a bigger picture. Because often when we work on sustainable fashion, when we work on certain issues, we tend to focus on quite specific things that we're involved in, and we stop or we fail to see what's the bigger context of change that is required. So my goal today is to provide you with this context and hopefully to inspire you to see your role within that context, within that world of the future. Then I will speak about why fashion specifically needs to degrow. Then I will discuss one after another pillars of degrowth in fashion or pillars of a post-growth fashion world. And then a few words on creativity and imagination. So let's start by demystifying degrowth. First question, who has heard the word degrowth before? Woohoo, amazing. Who can explain to me what it is? Exactly. We have someone brave. Would you like to do that? Very good, very good. It's a very simple concept, but it's new. And so many people are still shy about, expressing what it is, what it means. But before we get into definitions, let me just walk you through some pretty sad illustrations. I will go through them quickly, I promise, but this is a painful process we need to do. These are the planetary boundaries. Is everyone more or less aware of what planetary boundaries are? A concept that was developed by a Resilience Institute in Stockholm that is about biophysical limits of our planet. And the sad part here is that from the moment that they were discussed in 2009 and first presented and then elaborated over the past years, we keep bypassing them further and further and further. So despite knowing that there are planetary boundaries and that we are already bypassing some of them in terms of multiple issues related to our biophysical systems, we continue our development as if nothing is happening. We also have another concept that overlaps with the planetary boundaries, which is about the bottom level, the lowest floor of what people should have. Because we can speak about the limits of the planet, but there are also minimum limits of certain goods and services and resources that are needed so that people could actually live a decent life. We call it a social floor and environmental ceiling. And this concept here has been developed by Kate Raworth in 2017. It's called the donut economics. And here it's overlapping actually with research that shows us that actually most countries already overcome the environmental ceiling if they have reached the social floor. But if they are under the environmental ceiling, then most likely people who live in these countries are not at the social standard level that is required for decent life. We're really in a tough spot with very strong inequalities between the rich and the poor. What we need to do, where we need to go, is within the green donut, the donut economics. And Amsterdam is really innovative because this concept has been adopted at a city level to guide the transformation, which is really inspiring. In terms of using resources, this is another graph. Don't read too much into it. The idea here is to show the country overshoot date, to show by when a country uses up resources of the planet that are its fair share. And most countries today, especially the wealthiest country, if we look at Qatar, already on February 10th, they've used up resources that should be allocated to them for a whole year-long use. At the same time, countries like Ecuador, Indonesia, or Jamaica can actually last almost a whole year with a year worth of resources. These are called country overshoot days. I encourage you to check out where Netherlands are on this graph. And that was a snapshot per year of 2023. But if we look at the historical transformation of how things changed, we see that it wasn't always like this, and that we're actually speeding up the use of resources as we go. Since 2071, when was the first time that they kind of, this NGO did the analysis for the country overshoot moments, we can see that the day of Earth overshoot day per planet is actually moving closer and closer and closer to the beginning of the year, which means that the pace, the speed at which we're using up the resources, the material throughput is actually intensifying. Behind these graphs, we also hide very, very critical, important element of inequalities. And I cannot state this strongly enough. This is the latest updated graph by Oxfam on inequalities that shows us very clearly that the top 1%, the richest 1%, are responsible for top 1% responsible for 10% of global emissions, and the richest 10% are responsible for 50% of global emissions. I would like you to just take a second and try to sink this data in. So 1 out of 10 people, if we look at this graph, is responsible for consuming resources that are for 5 people, not for 1. And then the bottom 50% are responsible for about 10% of emissions globally. There's this kind of weird reversed relationship. This means that where do the wealthiest people live? Hello, I come from Switzerland. But you guys are also located, like you live in a very wealthy and privileged country. All of us in Europe should be taking responsibility, should be taking these graphs seriously. And consumption of different resources is very unequally distributed, and those who overconsume should be aware of it, should be aware of the privilege and of the volumes of overconsumption that are happening by default without them even much reflecting on it. It's just how the system is organized today. Where do resources go when we speak about this overconsumption? When we speak about overconsumption is the other side of overproduction, right? So where do resources go? Here is a graph that shows us by different countries, the different areas of consumption where we actually go through resources, which is food, mobility, energy, which is used for household warming, and leisure and goods. And by goods, within goods, we include different consumer goods, including, for example, electronics, and the topic of my today's intervention, fashion and clothes. So fashion has grown to be recognized, fashion, textiles, clothes, to be recognized as the 4th most polluting consumption domain in Europe after mobility, food, and energy use. And finally, in 2019, the EEA, European Environment Agency, put it out there with a report, and we are now able to work on it because it is finally a justification and some sort of data that helps us to put fashion in the spotlight. Why do the resources go so quickly through the system? Why do we intensify so much? On the one hand, we do consume more. per capita. On the other hand, there are programs in place to encourage this quicker material throughput. And those programs are called obsolescence. I don't know if design students here are familiar with planned obsolescence or built-in obsolescence. These are programs that have, the initial idea came from the 1920s when there was several producers of light bulbs that came together in a secret meeting. And they talked to each other from different countries. And they talked to each other and they said, our light bulbs work for too long. They last too long. That decreases our profits. If our light bulbs were serving less time, then we would make, we could sell more light bulbs. And what they did, there is even a name for this, they asked engineers to tweak the light bulbs in a way that they would go out of use faster. This was the first recorded example. That secret meeting was made public in the 60s or 70s. It became known to the public. And now we know that in many electronic goods, for example, there are built-in programs that actually reduce the lifespan of a piece of equipment. The phones, I'm sure many of you know, after an update 2 or 3 years into the use, suddenly it stops working and you have to buy a new one. So it's not by miracle, it's not by surprise. Washing machines, everything. If we look across different electronic products, actually the lifespan of products has reduced significantly. There's also perceived obsolescence, which is very visible in fashion, la mode. How long can you wear a certain design? How long do you wear a certain color? So built-in is when the garment or unit uses this function, and the perceived obsolescence is when consumers think that it's no longer fashionable. So these are the reasons behind why we keep buying more and more. So not only that people want to buy more, but also sometimes we kind of have to, because things don't last that long as they used to. In terms of solutions, there are 2 logics that I wanted to share with you. The first one is the logic of efficiency, which can be translated as make or consume better. Here's an example of how fabric used to be produced 200 years ago versus now. The output of these different types of machinery is of course very different, and this is an example of an efficiency measure in which you improve how much the device can produce, how many meters per minute, how many units per hour can a seamstress make, etc. These are all examples of improving efficiency. And among different concepts, circular economy is also a manifestation of an efficiency concept, logic, in which we're trying to move away from the bad linear economy in which resources are really badly used because they're wasted, towards an economy which resources are better used. But please note that circular economy, as envisaged, doesn't speak about any sort of reductions. It doesn't speak about whether anything other than the loop should change. It doesn't say that the throughput of this system should change. So circular economy logic can be qualified, let's say, as an efficiency measure for the system. And there are limits, there are important limits to efficiency. For example, this is an example of cars and the size of cars, how it changed over the past 30, 40 years. So imagine that today not only we need more cars because more people can afford and want to have cars, but also the size of cars has increased. And this Range Rover, I assume, would use at least double the amount of resources, metal, plastic, and other resources as the Mini on the right. So we're increasing the numbers of units, but we're also increasing the volumes of materials that are required to make those. There is another logic on which I rely a lot in this conversation. It's the logic of sufficiency, the logic of enoughness, which can be translated as make, consume less. And it's distinctly different from making or consuming better. Sufficiency has been described as a set of policy measures, daily consumption, and business practices that avoid the demand for energy, materials, land, water, and other natural resources while delivering well-being for all within the planetary boundaries. This is Yamina Zaheb, who is a brilliant person who was responsible for introducing this definition into the IPCC report of 2022. So this is the logic of sufficiency. Does this remind you of anything? It should, because this is essentially the same thing as, this not the same thing, but it's the logic behind the ideas of degrowth. So degrowth has been defined, there are multiple definitions, they have been evolving. It is a discourse that comes really from academia for many years, underfunded academics were working on this and not giving up, and finally it got attention of the right people. There was a big conference on degrowth, post-growth in the EU Parliament in May, which really changed how many people are talking about it. A year ago, very few people in the fashion sector related degrowth, talked about degrowth in fashion. Now this year, I can see the number of people is really mushrooming, and people are trying to apply it and trying to figure out how to do it, how to go with it. And it's really, really inspiring. So degrowth is understood as a planned and democratic reduction of production and consumption as a solution to the socio-ecological crisis that exists today. And we see degrowth as a way towards a steady state economy, a state that is called post-growth. So in this absolutely lovely graph, which I really like, you can see that the use of resources has been skyrocketing, and it's way above this corridor, of planetary limits, while not respecting at the same time the social floor, as we know from research. So what we need to do is our economy needs to go through the phase of degrowth in a planned, democratic manner in order to reach the state of the donut, right? In that corridor that we were talking about, the upper and the lower limits of consumption. And then stay there. It could still sometimes grow, sometimes decrease, but it would be operating in a more steady state, planet and society-friendly way. And in order to get there, right now there are great programs. There is a wonderful project that is working on how could we redefine our economic systems. I'm not an economist, never aspired to be, but there are some good people working on it. I'm really positive that they will figure it out. They will figure out new models that would help us, rather than orienting our hopes and dreams towards GDP, the gross economic product, as an indicator of development of countries. If we could refocus this towards well-being for all, well-being for people to be at the heart of our development strategies. And what needs to degrow, and I'm quoting here Jason Hickel, one of the degrowth scholars who spoke in Brussels at the post-growth conference, we should start with the ecologically destructive industries, such as SUVs especially, and the cars, moving towards slow mobility. And here's an example of Barcelona transforming its streets into pedestrian areas. Here in Amsterdam, you guys have a special situation with bikes and also quite a lot of pedestrian areas. But overall, the idea is to move away from cars. And if I show this in the US or in Canada, people simply laugh in my face because the infrastructure for cars is just so strong there, and the lobby of cars is very strong. What also needs to degrow is production of meat. Moving towards plant-based diet is an integral element of a post-growth future. And here an example, we had a very nice project with the schools in Geneva in which they really managed to reduce consumption of meat over the duration of several years. And kids seem to be really happy. And of course, at the heart of today's talk is fashion. On the left, you see a child working in the fashion supply chain. Very not uncommon to see children working in fashion supply chains. Today, we need to move towards slow fashion. And on the right, this green poster actually comes from the period of the Second World War. In the UK, they had a rationing system for the number of garments that a person could acquire. They couldn't buy them, but they had coupons. Because the resources were tight, for war reasons, the resources had to be diverted towards something else. So people still could get some garments and clothes, but they could get no more than 5, which is such a crazy coincidence because it is exactly what is required to buy no more than 5 to stay under the 1.5 planetary limits today. And we know that it worked. We know that people could very much do with those 5 garments per year. So why does fashion specifically need to degrow? First, I want to highlight that fashion system is really bigger than fashion industry. And I know that in our announcement today, we were talking about the fashion industry, but fashion system that I am talking about includes upstream production, so the production side, which is usually associated with the industry. It includes consumption phase in which consumers are involved, and it also includes downstream operations. Very often we forget that clothes is still there after we stop using it or after we don't want it anymore, but it's still there. And we need to speak about the fashion system in its entirety to understand what are the options for holistic transformation of all three of these elements. I will not dwell on this long, but we know today that fashion industry is really environmentally unjust. On the left, there's rivers in China that are colored in the color of denim that is dyed in the neighborhood in the neighboring factory with low protection of the environment and the laws, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. Chinese rivers were colored blue or the color of the latest fashion dye. On the right-hand side, you see Ghana, an open landfill where most of the textiles from the global north end up. And since most of the textiles today are made out of synthetic materials, they do not biodegrade. So this landfill is unlikely to change in the next 200 years in terms of look. It is also socially unjust. And for me, this is really a critical moment. On the left, you see Monsieur Marcia Ortega. He is in his late 80s, and he's the founder and the owner of Inditex, the parent company of Zara and many other brands that we all know and wear. Monsieur Ortega, every year, he's no longer with Zara, a founder of Inditex. He's no longer, employed, but he is still receiving dividends. So every year, Monsieur Ortega receives around $400 million in dividends, which he spends, this is not a secret, it's in Forbes, he spends on acquiring real estate around the world. On the right-hand side is the famous picture of Rana Plaza accident that happened 10 years ago in Bangladesh, which killed over 1,000 workers that were making garments for the Western brands, including companies like Zara. We can't trace them to Zara. But Bangladesh today, and for the past 15 years, has been the primary hub for production for Zara. And the annual income of a worker today in Bangladesh is $1,200. This is annual. This is not per month. This is per year. And these are poverty wages. If some of you saw the recent protests of workers in Bangladesh, of workers around Asian countries who are trying to unite, but they cannot because they're prevented by the government, there is really a lot of injustice that is happening. So just imagine a world in which 1 billion, the Zara's owner's wealth is estimated almost 90 billion euros today. Imagine 1 billion out of many, redistributed to ensure that people in the supply chain actually have access to healthcare, actually have childcare, so they don't have to be separated from their children for a whole year because they can't afford to have a child on the premises. A workplace with decent work standards, with decent social care. This is possible, but it requires redistribution of wealth, and this is not something that we talk about much. And yes, but these people working in Bangladesh are still better off having these jobs than not having these jobs. How many times I heard this argument? Many, many, many times. I would be rich if I had €1 for each comment. To me, this is a false dichotomy. This is a very neoliberal argument that many people push who are interested in maintaining the status quo. Because it's not about workers in Bangladesh having these bad jobs or not having these bad jobs. It's about them having these bad jobs or about having better jobs. So it's up to us to frame the question the way we want to frame it. It's up to us to formulate it in a way that we achieve change. To me, again, this is a false dichotomy. We're not asking about having jobs or not having jobs. We're asking about having better jobs than what they have right now. So to me, per capita share and this equality on a per capita basis is fundamental. It is critical to recognize that people have equal rights to well-being. And these rights depend on the fact of being born a human being. And it's not okay to normalize inequalities based on the fact where the person is born. For me, redistribution of wealth is the most basic assumption for building a post-growth future for fashion or other industries. We see inequalities not only in production, but also in consumption. This is from the Roosmarie report that I participated in writing. While the richest 20% in the UK today emits 83% above the 1.5 degree target, 74% of people living in Indonesia live below sufficiency consumption levels of fashion. So they don't have enough what we consider to be the decent level of clothing consumption for a decent life. This is a difficult graph. I apologize for that, but this is a very important representation of findings that we did with the Roosmarie Institute. We analyzed across different countries what are the consumption-based emissions from different areas of the world, and we see that especially in Australia, Japan, United States, consumption of fashion is really has a very high carbon footprint. We see this dotted line is the cutoff above which consumption really is above our fair share. And what is beyond that line stays within the fair share. We calculated also that there are not only among countries, some expected differences, but within countries, people consume very differently. So the wealthiest 20% in the UK consume above 83% above their fair share. But the poorest 20% in the UK actually are living well within the sufficiency, corridor. So when we're talking about interventions, when we're talking about changes, we really need to understand who are we talking about, and not to penalize those who are already in vulnerable situations in terms of consuming, in terms of producing. There are a lot of people who are vulnerable. And when we are trying to develop changes, transformation, we should think about them first before we think about anything else. And when we speak about limits to efficiency applied to fashion from the latest report of RAP, the companies in the UK had reduced the carbon impact of their textiles by 12% in 2022 and water by 4% on a per ton basis. 2019 to 2022. However, this was negated by a 13% increase in the volume of textiles produced and sold, according to the report. The increased production rates meant overall water was actually rose by 8%, and the carbon reduction figure stood at just 2%. Which means, what does it mean? We are going for efficiency gains at a per unit approach. So per unit, per dress, per pair of shoes, we may have reduced the carbon footprint. But because we're producing so many of them, and the volumes that we're producing continue to grow, the overall effect of these per unit efficiency gains are not visible. Efficiency measures alone cannot bring us and the fashion system to the levels of emissions compatible with the 1.5 degree target. This is what the Roosmarie report clearly states. And what we really need are sufficiency-oriented measures. Now, moving on to the pillars and the specifics. Before I go into that, I wanted to show you the Bayeux tapestry. The Bayeux tapestry is located in the north of France, and it was made, many of you probably know better than me, in the 11th century. It was made by what is estimated to be dozens of embroiderers, women, ladies in waiting of Queen Mathilde. And it's a collaborative tapestry, because it's not one person who made it, it's 70 meters long. Come on. You probably spend your whole life on a 70-meter long tapestry. These are many people who each did their share, who each added their element, like this horse. I love this horse. I think it's a really great horse. I wish I could do that kind of embroidery. But the point is that Bayeux tapestry is the way it is because of many people's inputs. And conversations that we are having today about post-growth, about transformation, to me are a bit of like Bayeux tapestry. So if anyone tells you that they have everything figured out, they can tell you exactly how the post-growth fashion or degrowth fashion should look like, I would be cautious, because I think we're all in the process of co-creating that vision. And to me, what I would like to propose is my little horse is going to come in the following slides. I've been working for a while on minimalism, voluntary simplicity in fashion consumption, but I also wrote some papers for NGOs that focus on sufficiency. One of them will be published next month, but I'm happy to already share some elements of it. What would be the way to mainstream, let's say, sufficiency and degrowth ideas in transforming the fashion system? So the first pillar, of course, very expectedly so, would focus on production, how we produce. Today, emissions from fashion, the current levels are about 2.1 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. It is estimated if nothing changes, if things continue as they are, which they are, it would reach around 2.7 billion tons in 2030. But in order to stay under 1.5 degree, in order to avoid the catastrophic impacts for the planet, we need to be at 1.1 tons of CO2 equivalent in 2030. This means drastic reductions of emissions. And does this tell you much? Does anybody know how much a ton of CO2 equivalent is? I have no idea. I just look at the numbers and I see that one is bigger than the other and much bigger than the other. But I think it's important for us to absorb this information and to translate it into something that's more tangible. And actually, what is more tangible is material throughput. Today, we know that actually the fashion's emissions are almost directly tied to the production of new garments out of virgin resources, which are primarily synthetic. So instead of speaking about CO2 emissions, which is the language of climate policy, and of course it gets us on the agenda in terms of policy, but instead of talking about that, I think for fashion, we could very safely speak about material throughput, the tons of stuff that we produce, the number of units that we produce. So we could speak about reducing the volumes of things, garments, shoes, accessories that we produce by more than half by 2030, right? And some of you may have seen this infographic in which we hear that an average person buys 60% more items today than in 2000. It was from 2015. And that also we use them for half as long as we used to. The basis for this is a McKinsey report that nobody can track. Again, a big issue with data transparency and data availability for the fashion system. But the point is that just recently we had this article on Vogue talking about how actually hard it is to understand how much is produced. So other than this beautiful infographic proposed by Greenpeace, we actually do not know how many garments are produced globally in the world today. And because we don't know, we obviously cannot, because brands are not obliged to disclose this. Nobody is supposed to disclose it. Even for example, in Canada, we can't even know how many units have been imported because the statistics of imports doesn't count units. It only counts monetary value of things. So imagine at the scale of the world, we actually don't have data to understand how many units and garments are produced. This is really bad. As a researcher, as a person, I am really concerned about this. So for fashion production in a post-growth world would be transparent. This is the first thing to start with. It has to be transparent in terms of volumes of production, in terms of value chain, all the stakeholders, one after the other, knowing who is based where, who does what, who gets paid what, so that would enhance responsibility. Secondly, it has to be drastically reduced in terms of volumes of new garments produced, phasing out fossil fuel-based fibers. Today, 60% of fibers, 64% of fibers in the world that are produced are polyester. That's a lot. And it really has to, it's made out of fossil fuels and it really needs to be phased out. We're also speaking about extended producer responsibility here, in which brands would be responsible for what happens at the end of life with garments that they produce. The third point is offering wages for a decent life and social security for workers involved all the way through the value chain. And when we're speaking about degrowth and post-growth world, I don't see necessarily reshuffling and relocalizing, even though some things could. But it's important not to leave people behind. People who are currently involved in the systems of production in countries that are heavily dependent on these products as exports need to be taken as a priority. So we should focus on improving their conditions of work first before we decide to cut off and completely reduce imports from these countries. So focusing altogether on improving social standards and environmental standards in these countries is really critical. And as an example of a post-growth enterprise, here's the link to Well-Rounded, where we're trying to figure out how to build a post-growth brand that would still be profitable, but at the same time, how much does it grow? Where do we stop growing? So if you're interested in this conversation, or if you yourself are building a brand that aspires to be a post-growth compatible brand, please reach out to me. I have many questions for you. Maybe you also have questions for me. And I think it's through conversations and through partnerships that we can, figure it out together, because it is difficult. It's difficult to do the right thing today, I find. The second pillar is consumption, of course, how we consume. Living with less has been proven to have positive impacts on our subjective well-being. I've analyzed multiple minimalist fashion challenges in which people really report that by reducing their fashion consumption, they were able to feel better. They started, seeing things in their wardrobe that they haven't noticed before. They discovered their style. And we have on the one hand side, this input that living with less is good for you. And then on the other side, we have the Hoarder Cool report that tells us living with less is good for the planet. And the number that we are landing at is roughly 74 garments per wardrobe, not 174. 174 is currently the average size of a wardrobe. This data actually comes from the Netherlands, so it's very close to you guys. It's Irene Maldini who did this research. She estimates that an average wardrobe in the Netherlands contains around 174 garments. We need to reduce it to 74. And while reducing it to 74, we can consume by no more than 5 new garments, shoes, or accessories per year that are made out of virgin resources. This is an example of a sufficiency wardrobe. We played a little bit with this at the Hoarder Cool report. I won't go into much detail here, but you could build your own wardrobe and capsules, and there is definitely a lot of opportunities. When we think about 74 garments, some people are like, oh, but that's maybe what I have. Most people underestimate grossly the amount of stuff that they own, by the way. And we also know that in the 60s, an average Parisian woman would have roughly 40 pieces in her wardrobe. And I think the 60s were a very good time for fashion and for Parisian women. So they are known for having their style, which shows us that, 40 garments, 50 garments is really a very generous allowance. It's not a constraint. It's a nice allowance that people can work with. And again, some of the research that I did on reducing fashion consumption, people report that when they decided to work and live with fewer garments, but focusing on the ones that they love, the ones that they think fit them well, enhance their creativity. So combining things that you otherwise wouldn't combine, but now you're under this constraint, you have fewer things, help them develop their style. And many people actually record that living with less and living within the sufficiency mindset, you actually are much more creative. You're creative about accessorizing, you're creative about combining things that maybe don't go together, also upcycling and redoing things and engaging creatively if you can. Here's another challenge that I have for you. We're starting this, it's a collaborative project that will run in 2024. It's called the Joyful Closet. It's for people who are already thinking that they should probably change the relationship with their closets. Please sign up. It's for everyone. It's not to convince you that fast fashion is not good. We don't have the resources to do the convincing. It's for people who are already inclined, and it's open, it's free. It will run for a year, and every month there will be a kind of a new challenge that will be given to try out. And in return, we're really trying to collect data and to understand whether there are strong links between our reported subjective well-being and reduced and more mindful fashion consumption practices. Finally, disposal of fashion in a post-growth world would also be different than today. Garments would serve a much longer time before being discarded. Exports of textile waste from wealthy to less wealthy countries would be banned. Fiber-to-fiber recycling would be scaled, and local sorting and reuse of garments would be mandatory by cities. That is something that cities have control of. This is something I'm working on with Geneva City, and I know other cities in Amsterdam has done a great job. We will have Roosmarie who will talk about this, I think, later. You guys are really like one of the pioneers in managing local sorting and reuse, which is not the case in other cities. But what is happening now, this output, blind exports of things from most cities, they only encourage overconsumption because we don't see what happens at the end of life of the garment. We're not confronted with the mountains, and they end up in vulnerable countries like Ghana or Pakistan, where they, at some point, any garment reaches the end of life, right? So we need to think what's going to happen to it. What kind of material is it? Is it going to biodegrade? If not, which part of it's going to biodegrade? If not, what? Where does it go? Does it end up in an incinerator? Does it end up in landfill or in the ocean? So this is something to really be conscious about. And now the final point, the social justice. Social justice is critical for the transformation towards a post-growth world. Fashion in a post-growth world that leaves no one behind. To me, I would like to invite you to imagine a world in which a worker, in Bangladesh does not have to work 16 hours a day as they do today to make hundreds of cheap garments for poverty wages. This is the status quo. And anyone who normalizes this, I think, has a moral challenge ahead. This is the status quo, but it doesn't have to be like this. I believe that people should be treated equally. I would never go and work for 16 hours for poverty wage. Why? Because I think that I deserve a different social standard. Why so? Because I live in a different place? Because my skin is of a different color? Because I went to university? To me, we really should reconsider our framing. We should put the per capita and individuals at the heart of the transformation. Everybody should be entitled to the same level of treatment. And if I wouldn't expect anything more than 8 hours a day, why do I expect a girl in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan to work for 16 and not see her child? So we could imagine a world in which this worker would work for 8 hours a day, making 10 times fewer garments, but of better quality, be paid a decent wage, have healthcare, childcare, so that she could see her children, and educational support and social security. What do we need for that? Redistribution of wealth within the fashion system. And a few words on creativity, imagination to finish. Amitav Ghosh once said, we are today facing a crisis of imagination. We're at a point that major changes around us are happening whether we want it or not. And it's easier for us to imagine a post-apocalyptic world, a giant nuclear mushroom, a completely, the world that is submerged by water or hit by a meteorite, than to imagine a happy, sustainable future. You might be surprised to hear that, but we worked on the Fashion Futures project with 15 co-authors. It was supposed to be a fun couple of months exchange. We ended up working on it for a year and a half. It is difficult, even for people working specifically on sustainable fashion consumption. It was difficult to imagine a world of sustainable fashion consumption of the future. Why? Because somehow we're being shy. We don't know, but this is not realistic, but this is not going to happen. But to me, without having a vision, we can't really get there unless we get there by accident, which is unlikely to happen. So in order to get what we want, we need to figure out what we want. And for me, for this reason, having visions and discussing visions, working with our imagination is really, really important. The Fashion Futures 2040 project that I'm talking about, this is the link to the report itself that we published last year. Fashion Futures was exactly about that. How can we imagine the future? And I would encourage you guys to read it if you have the time. This is a building block on what is going to be developed into a future, what is already being developed into a future, more nuanced discussion. What we did in Fashion Futures 2040 is we developed 4 scenarios for the future that would be located, the 4 quadrants. One would be top-down change, so the government decides to change things, versus efficiency, so figuring out how to produce things more efficiently. So it's government initiated and it goes towards efficiency. The other one would be government initiated that goes towards sufficiency, which one day the government says, okay, we're just reducing by half material throughput. Don't know how, but it's just going to happen. It's an imagination. It's a protopia scenario. And the other two are bottom-up led. So in the other two, the leading force towards the change is not the government, but the people. And in one, it goes towards efficiency, the other one towards sufficiency. We discussed in detail each of these scenarios. So we took these premises and then we developed the daily practices in worlds like this. How could they look like? And the idea was to really show that sustainable fashion consumption can be different. It can take different shapes. It can take different forms. There are nuances to it. And then to try to position oneself, like, where would I see myself as a consumer in this fashion future 2040? And there are two scenarios that are focused towards sufficiency. One in which it's the government that pushes to reduce material throughput. In the other one, where it is consumers that stop consuming less. And this is my last slide. I invite you to imagine a world where consumers stop buying fast fashion and generally reduce their consumption by a lot. What would be the role of designers? And I was counting on seeing design students, but let's all think about it. What would be the role of designers in this world where there's just not as much stuff anymore? I would love to have your inputs. This is a Menti board, right? This is a Menti board where you could just, add your thoughts, and we could then later collect them. We did a similar exercise at a major industry conference in Canada with the industry professionals. I thought I was going to get some eggs thrown down my way. In the end, we ended up having the most interesting conversation with people, because we already see that even if industry is not, at the heart of the consumption conversation in our framing, they were really passionate and they had ideas and they had suggestions. And it was so inspiring because we could see that people in the room already see elements of the future, and because they see it, once you formulate it, once you visualize it, then you can set up targets, then you can set up pathways how to get there. So I will end with this. I don't know if you guys had a moment to scan the Menti. I'd just like to thank you so much for your attention, and please join us in the game with Menti. I think we'll have a few minutes, but I will give the word to Oyunaa now for transitioning towards the panel talk. Thank you so much for your attention.
No, sorry. Switch microphone. Switch microphone. All right. Well, let's directly open the discussion also for you to really ask away questions or to get a little bit more into the subject. I will start off the panel talk officially. I will give you this one.
Okay. So we're waiting for the panel.
All right. Can everybody hear me well? All right, nice. So moving on to the next part will be the panel talk. First, let me do a little proper introduction of myself. My name is Oyunaa Kerssens. I'm a third-year business and development student here at Amfi. And within this creative calendar, we organize also this panel. And I'm focusing more on denim, and also my interest has slightly changed toward this subject. So please follow me along. Let me introduce you to all the panel speakers. Of course, Katia will join us for the panel's talk as well. And first I want to invite to the stage is Kiki Boreel. She's a fashion model and climate activist. Yeah, it works? Oh, thank you. Nice, it works. Yeah, so welcome, Kiki. Thank you. So she's a fashion model and climate activist. She used to fly around the world, but now made a step from a fashion model to a role model. She studied future planet studies and is appointed as the climate ambassador, future in the Netherlands, right? All right, and our third panelist will be Roosmarie Ruigrok. She's She's the founder of Clean and Unique. It's a sustainable fashion platform here in Amsterdam. She has an extensive experience in the industry, and that's what definitely makes her an expert on circular textiles. All right, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Let me. Yes. Let's begin. Yes. Yes, thank you. Let's start off with a more little introduction about yourself. Kiki, could you tell me what you're currently doing and how did you get involved within the fashion industry?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, is it?
The button, yeah. If you there, right? Yeah.
No? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Currently, what I'm currently doing actually is studying international land and water management in Wageningen. So really more on agriculture, which actually has a lot to do with fashion. We heard a lot on polyester, but fashion also has a lot of agriculture behind it. And how I got within the sustainable fashion sphere is really, I started out as a model for over 10 years ago now. And flew around the world, as you were saying, really working with a lot of fast fashion companies, Zara, Mango. I've worked everywhere, and really started seeing that this way of producing, this overproduction that's happening, new racks of clothes coming in every minute, even if you're done at 4 o'clock and you've shot already 60 outfits, you're thinking, I'm done, I can go to the hotel. But there's a whole new rack coming in with another 60 outfits, and I just thought this is not the industry that I want to contribute to. And I was contributing by buying clothes, but also I was actively asking other people to buy clothes that they're not going to need. So I decided to stop, but stopping doesn't do anything. So I decided to speak up and only work for sustainable brands to really help them gain vision or gain visibility, and to really speak out against the fast fashion industry.
Wow, thank you. All right, well, Katia, I think it's more clear for you what you're already doing, but maybe just curious, how do you get involved towards researching the fashion system?
So my PhD was in climate ethics and politics. I obtained it in 2014, and it was in education, kind of meta level concepts. I worked at the UN, UNESCO, and then I had a child. That changed a lot what I thought about what I put on his body, on my body. And at some point, I came across an article that said that fashion was the second most polluting industry in the world after the big oil. It is not true, but it's pretty close to true. And I was like, no. And then, of course, I started using my research skills to figure out whether that was actually the case. Very little data, lack of transparency, and slowly I realized that this is actually an excellent research topic because there's not enough research in this area. So this is how I got involved.
Thank you. And Roosmarie, what are you currently doing?
Currently, I'm still running since 17 years the Clean and Unique platform. We have over 55 stakeholders at that platform who are the coalition of the willings, I call them. And next to that, because I cannot make a living out of it, because I want to have it open sourced and open to everyone. And next to it, I do a lot of projects. And recently, I finalized the Reflow European project from within the municipality of Amsterdam, who did a research about all the textiles, what comes in an urban city and what is discarded, and what we can do to it to reflow it. And from that project out, there was an idea of the Green Deal on denim. And from the Reflow project, I become the coordinator of this Green Deal on denim, and that's ending also. So I'm now working on a lot of reporting on all those projects.
Oh wow, yeah, I can imagine. Maybe just to go a little bit further for Kiki, for you, was there any particular moment that really sparked this change in you?
A few moments, I would say. First of all, it was a book called Hoe gaan we dit uitleggen? But for English, how are we going to explain this? By Jelmer Mommers, who's a journalist, and he really sketched two different worlds. One world where everyone starts doing their best to make a equitable, greener future, and the other one where we just keep doing what we're doing. And he asks you the question, which side are you on? I wasn't on the right side, I can clearly say now. So that was the first seed kind of in my mind. And then from there, it was, going back into this industry, seeing all these garments where people behind the scenes were really not enthusiastic about what we were doing. It would be more the case that I would work for a lot of German clients where you would, again, shoot 60 outfits a day. And after 20, everyone is kind of done with it. Like, fed up with all the outfits. No one loved the outfits that we were shooting anyway. It was, how are we going to sell this ugly dress? Okay, if you just make the pose a little bit, maybe if you laugh with it and maybe if your hand can cover that ugly part of it, we can still sell it. So there was no passion in it anymore. It's a buildup of all these different things that make me really want to not work for these brands anymore. And then if you start working with a sustainable brand and you start working with young creators that have a vision, then you see the work is fun again. So it was very clear which way I had to go.
Nice, thank you. Katia, as you were mentioning, there's not a lot of data available about the fashion industry. Is that one of the biggest challenges in your job? And how?
Well, the biggest challenge of my job is to do 3 full-time jobs in 4.5 days a week. But yes, definitely data availability has been plaguing the whole research area for a long time. There's lots of misinformation. Some of it is actually did good. Like there are hooks that attracted attention of people, and that misinformation of second most polluting industry in the world after big oil, while it is not true, it still attracted quite a few people, I think, to the cause. But when, for example, I need to pitch my research project to a research authority, I cannot show an infographic from Instagram as a justification. And in order to do research, in order to solve problems, we need to have good research. We need to have good evidence. In order to acquire funding to get this good evidence, I need to prove that this is a valid research area. And I can't sometimes. I would get feedback from funders saying like, oh, why would you quote McKinsey? I'm like, because this is literally the only source that exists, and I can't imagine data. So we're still there, but some good things are improving. Yeah.
Thank you. And Roosmarie, for you.
Can I react on that? Maybe that's also nice that it's really true what she's saying, because from my experience from the denim deal, there was ongoing research by House of Denim. And already in 2019, all the stakeholders of the House of Denim here in Amsterdam, they said it was possible to add 20% post-consumer textiles in a denim garment or in a denim jeans. And recently, Saxion University approached us because they have an ongoing research about all kinds of materials who are what they think it could be recycled into new yarns. And then House of Denim say, yeah, but we said already that this is possible. Now we found out that for a long time already, spinners, they add already industrial textiles, discarded industrial cutting waste from the textile industry into the new yarns. And that is 5 to 7%. And the rest, it's post-consumer. So this 20% is also cut in pieces. And that makes that we become aware that 20% post-consumer textiles used in new textiles, it's still a big challenge. So to overstep, so everyone say, we have to do more, and look, it is already possible. No, we are not there yet. We have to innovate. We have to understand deeper. And even about the numbers, they say that 27 million of jeans coming up on the Dutch market, because also on CBS, that is our source in the Netherlands, they count, in the denim jeans is around 3 kilograms of cotton. So when we count easily, it's 27 million of denim jeans. And all the brands who I'm working with on the denim jeans, they say it's not true. But to prove how many jeans are directly on the Dutch market, we don't have these figures. So that's why we need really good sources, and it all starts with transparency and track and trace and all these tools, this holistic system we need really to tackle really the problem. Because only by understanding what we have to do, brands are going to move. If they don't understand, they are not doing anything, and money will always the driven factor to become a successful brand.
All right, thank you. Well, while you're already touching upon more on the industry, which is, it's perfect. I have some more questions about the industry. Maybe for you, Katia. How would you describe the current phase of the industry?
I think I had this experience. I was invited to go to, I usually speak at scientific conferences. It's very calm and chilled and we have fun. But this year I was invited to go and speak at an industry conference twice. And one of them was the major sustainable fashion conference that exists. And I found there were all of the sustainability managers, wannabe sustainability managers of the fashion brands, and different actors. And I felt there was a very strong cognitive dissonance. There was a disarray between what people say from the stage and what they say in the corridors. I believe that there is this notion that we play different roles in life. I play a role of a researcher. I play a role of a mother. I play a role of a friend. We all play different roles in our workplace, in our private life, social roles. And I saw that women, mostly women, who work in fast fashion brands and brands that are responsible for the difficult situation that we're at, they're having a tough time. They're having a tough time recognizing that they can't actually change things from within. And it's difficult. But it also is a signal that people are on the right path. People who are within the industry, they don't always get positive response to their initiatives. You can come up with the best initiative, but if your CEO says it cuts through a bottom line, it's not going to fly. So I think the more there is a wave, there is a tide coming up. People are becoming more and more convinced. The right values are spreading. I don't know, Kiki, if you share my optimism here. But I think I'm a glass half full kind of girl. I think it's going in the right direction. It's just going there very slowly.
Kiki, would you have any additions?
Yeah, I want to, because you send us the question, like, how would you describe the face? And I think cognitive dissonance is something that came to mind as well, but also bipolar. Because at some point, there is all these innovative brands and new material innovations and new techniques on how to recycle. And you really see this trend going, like, it makes me really optimistic as well. I speak to so many great people, and then I step out of my bubble and I speak at a different school, for example, with Gen Z, where I always assume Gen Z is this new generation that's really gonna, change the world. Not all of them are. The ones that speak up are, but you still see this mass consumption, mass production. So at the one hand, we have innovative brands, and at the other hand, we have Shein and Temu gaining speed. At the one hand, we have consumers that are super aware and that are speaking up on social media. And at the other hand, it is those people that are still buying fast fashion because they have no other things to go to, because they don't have the money to buy other things. and also because of peer pressure, right? So yeah, it's a really bipolar phase, but I'm optimistic we go to the positive side. We just need to drag people along with us.
Thank you. Just keep it for now. Do you think social media plays a role in it, and how?
Oh, such a big role. Yeah. I think fashion was already really accelerating. We go from fashion to fast fashion to ultra fast fashion. But also when I started modeling 10 years ago, e-commerce was really ugly and something you wouldn't really want to do. And then e-commerce became this massive thing, and now social media is a massive thing. So I would also have campaigns for a brand just for 2 or 3 social media pictures, and then there's influencers adding up to that. So you just have everything within reach, and everything just became so much quicker from 1 trend a year to 2 to 52 trends a year now. And I think social media has a massive role in that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Roosmarie, do you have any additions to that?
I'm not a social media expert, but of course I see also the influence of it, because lately I was also working in a coffee corner, and on a Friday afternoon, 3 beautiful girls, they came in with all these Primark boxes, and they went to the toilet, they undressed themselves, they redressed themselves, and they were sipping tea within their new dresses. So and they were around, I think, 11, 12 years old. So I think the pressure around, and to be there because maybe they are not able to go out in the bar or something. I saw it in front of my eyes. So I think the pressure is huge. And but I live in a bubble, because I live now for 20 years. I try always to be surrounded with the coalition of the willings. So 20 years ago, I started with Amnesty International, Fairwear Foundation, at Fair Trade, with Clean and Unique, and all this. So I'm always surrounded with that people come to me with, okay, but how we have to do it. So these people around me are always eager to understand how we are going to do it. So, and every little hill of sand I can move. Like in 2009, I was in charge of to bring in fair trade cotton in the Netherlands. And my daughter, she went to the hotel industry. And that made me to be inspired to work with the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, because it's only white, no, not 16 times per year a new outfit, etc. for all this. So I was thinking, okay, this hotel industry, and I brought 16 hotel owners to Mali, and I showed them the conventional cotton on the land. I showed there's conventional cotton, there's organic cotton, and there's fair trade organic cotton. And then they said, now I understand what I have to do. Until today, 80% of of the hotels in the Netherlands, when you go to sleep there, it's organic or fair trade organic cotton, and no one talks about it anymore. It's the new. And I hope there's also a big campaign about the industry we want. I hope that slightly we go in an industry that the industry takes responsibility, because they have also, when they want to be durable and to sustain, they have to act. And although they know, maybe they don't know yet how to go there. Yeah. But at the end, it will be forced because of climate change, because of all kind of circumstances, that they are forced if they are willing to be there to sustain.
All right. Yes. Thank you. If you want to respond, feel free to take the mic.
Just want to add a couple of words actually on social media. I did several studies on social media, and one of them was about who talks about sustainable fashion on social media. And I have a question for you guys, because you look a bit tired. Who do you think was the loudest voice speaking about sustainable fashion on Instagram? Wild guesses are welcome.
Kardashians?
Yeah, woohoo with the...
Kim Kardashian. Good guess. More? Okay. Maybe. Other guesses? H&M, we have the winner. H&M. It is H&M. It's H&M and the Reliance polyester. Reliance Polyester is India's biggest producer of polyester, and they developed a very, very tiny innovation in which they do recycled polyester. And with their very huge reach, working through influencers, they had lots of likes. But H&M worked mostly through influencers in Asian countries and received lots of likes with the hashtag sustainable fashion or talking about sustainable fashion without much explanation. So if we look, again, glass can be half full and half empty, right? We could look at this and say, oh God, this is horrible. The world is going to collapse. But at the same time, what we found in my research and other researchers, we find that there are also very important communities of learning. If you have a question about how to wash your garment so it doesn't fall apart, where do you go? To your grandma? I doubt it. Most people don't go to their grandmas anymore. They are asking Instagram, TikTok, they're asking social media. So social media now hosts a wealth of information where influencers who are on more sustainable, on the right side of the equation, they are talking about things, they're talking about their learnings, they're talking about their experimentation, and lots of people are drawn towards those accounts as well. So in the final note, when we did this study, you can't say that social media is bad or it's good. It's a mirror that we hold against our society. And in the society, we see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can see all the different phases, all the different ranges of behaviors. And social media is just magnifying that. But there are good things that you can find there. And today, for many young people, this became the ultimate source of information. So it will continue to grow, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No, I can just add a few words on that, because I think we do need those voices that talk about sustainability, and luckily there are a lot that are talking about sustainability, but it, like you're saying, it magnifies it, so it also creates polarization. So I think it's also important to be a moderate voice and to share like the whole story instead of just these quotes, which is also Instagram. It's like short videos, short things. So it's like to have reliable information and people that do the research and go into depth. Luckily, we have someone in the audience that does that. Just want to point to Sarah for a second, like a green influencer that really does her research and then creates a whole story behind why she's stating something and really has researched different brands and different ways to do it. That's very important, I feel.
Thank you. That's already also touching upon the next subject about really what can we do. So maybe just to specifically ask it, like, what can we do as students? We're fashion students. We will be future players in the industry as well. But also, what can we do now maybe and also in the future to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that when you're searching for a job now or an internship, that you also can have your request to a brand. So ask to them, I am a student, but I only want to work in your company if sustainability is high on topic, and not doing only the talk, but also to do. And the good fashion brands, they are searching for good people and reliable people. So I think you have a voice over there as well.
Thank you.
I was already discussing with some of you. You are creative minds, so you really can rethink the way our system is. Ask questions, because I feel the system, like we were already saying, right? The people within the companies are working to make it better, but they are stuck in a system that they've worked in for so long. You're a new generation. You think in different ways. You really question the system. So bring that with you everywhere you go. Bring that new vision, bring the question marks, what if, but why are we doing it this way? And I think we need these creatives in the scene, because that's what fashion is. It's creativity, and we can really reimagine the whole world. So really bring that everywhere you go.
Yeah, I am so pleased to just like reconnect with the students so from creative backgrounds, because I teach mostly social sciences students in Geneva. I think, yeah, don't take anybody's nonsense. Just question everything and rebuild, because if you don't, who will? People are trying, and it's up to us and as individuals to do our fair share, like Kiki was saying. And of course, I cannot not say this: buy less. Reduce your own consumption and figure it out that what works for you, what is your happy number, how can you be more with less, and by your personal example is actually how you inspire others. If you are a happy individual with a small but beautiful closet who always looks beautiful and feels great about herself or himself, other people would like to imitate you. So go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. This is also actually what's been on the mind of our study association nowadays. We are developing our own merchandise collection, which we're in the middle of. And of course, all these considerations and choices that are out there are being made. So yeah, that's really nice to also see it, try to implement it more on a product level, really. Even though it's a really small project, we are still trying. Yeah, and about, because you told you also have starting now your own underwear brand. What kind of, I'm sure there are a lot of considerations that you took, but what are mentioning worth considerations you took in starting the brand, in how you develop it?
Yeah, I guess we could have a separate talk for like 2 hours about this, because I've been developing this product, this pilot, for the past 2 years, and I wanted to build a fully circular brand of underwear, a fully circular product. I didn't want to take anything less than that, and because I created it for my son, what was very critical for me, for the child, was to have no chemicals added, because I know about chemicals in fashion through my research. It's horrifying. So I really, really wanted to make a product that would be good for the planet, good for our butts, and good for, for everybody just to be happy about. And it took, 2 years. I'm very happy to say that we have the final prototypes, which kind of correspond to my criteria. But we were able to phase out all fossil fuel-based parts, some of which I didn't like. Elastan, obviously, in elastics, it's something you expect. But one thing I didn't expect that would be polyester threads that are usually used, in your cotton underwear. Very often, most of the time, the threads that are made to use the seam would be polyester, which doesn't biodegrade, And this is not something that is visible or understandable. It still says 100% cotton on the Andes. Or like figuring out the MOQs, minimum order quantities, for a startup. It's such a big deal, And in my experience, I was able to secure partnership in Greece, because the cotton is grown in Greece, and a partnership in Portugal. And in my experience, people are willing to meet me halfway, and it was so beautiful, to be honest. I was really touched. For example, the minimum order quantity for cotton from the Greek factory was 500 kilograms of cotton yarn. Can you imagine 500 kilograms of cotton yarn? I still don't. And I asked them, first the factory on my behalf asked, can we order less? They said no. And then I just called them and I said, Georgos, please, can I please have less? We're so small and I don't know what to do with this. And the Greek colleague said, let me see what I can do. And then he said, and then they made 300 for me, which is unheard of. I mean, they said no to everybody else. This is the minimum order quantity, and because they believed in my project, and I spent an hour explaining my concept, they were willing to meet me halfway. And the same with the Portuguese factory. Usually they do, 300 per model. They did 150 for me per model if I wanted to. Now we changed the idea, but they're willing to meet you halfway. So it's to inspire those of you who are thinking to build a brand or to be part of a brand. Don't, and the amount of times that I heard, this is not how it's done. Very many times I heard this along this 2-year journey. And I would ask, why? We don't know why, but that's just it. And so I asked to do it differently, and it can be done differently, and it works differently, but someone needs to ask. So it's to say that, try it out, figure it out, but know your numbers, know your base, know your reasons for doing different things, and you will get there.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. I hope that gives hope. Let's take a look at the Mentimeter, right? See if everybody what we all put in about our role of a designer. Um, all right, so would one of you like to respond to it? We see upcycling, local, design for durability.
Can't really reach in there.
Can you read it a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Also, if you still want to add something, please do. And also, after this, we will open up for you to ask all of your questions.
I think you can pile up, for now and then. If people have questions, we can already.
Yeah? Okay.
No
Yeah.
pressure.
Let's start off with some questions. If you have anything, please. Yes.
What I hear many times is that to clean up your closet is the first thing you have to do, to see what you already have, and to make, to put on your bed, take out everything on your closet, and to see what you already have, and what do you feel that it suits you really, where you're attached to, and what if there's a garment that you wear many times, maybe it's convenient. Also to ask why you have that closet, that garment in your closet, and why you are wearing it, and make your own mood board and feel what it belongs to you, because that makes also your choices in the future to buy garments or to textiles where you attached to. I think to start with that, so very simple, clean up your closet and see what belongs to you and what you think, no, this is not what I like. I don't wear it for a long time, or maybe it's broken. You have to repair it. Go to a tailor to repair it, or give it away to your friends or to a swap shop or something, and to see if you can have this trick of only 5 garments per year. So start by yourself to think what is attached to you. I think that is the starting point.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. On that, there's actually a really nice tool that Dirty Laundry developed here, which is a student-led climate activist fashion body of AMFI. And they developed the CMI, the Closet Mass Index, where you count all of your garment pieces, everything, and you categorize them in different categories, and you have a really nice insight of like, what do you even have in your closet, and how are you attached to it, and everything.
And in addition to that, I think it's so good to count and to collect data for yourself as well. But also, I think the main thing for me to be able to make that switch and to understand what is the right thing to do. To be fair, there is no perfect way to do things yet. But I feel if you slow down and really take the time, consciously buying stuff, consciously throwing things away, but also be conscious about your feeling while doing it. I think in our gut we do know what is right for us. We just get swept up in the haste of the city, in the pace that everyone's running around and wanting to have things next day delivery, go a weekend away with friends. But really take your time, really slow down, and very consciously make your decisions. I think that's the best thing you can do, and you can't be perfect. So you're not gonna make perfect choices right away, but you don't have to. Just try your best.
And thank you for this question. It is a tough, it's a tough one when you know too much for your own good, and you know that this is not sustainable, but then this is also not sustainable. Then where do I land? As I said, we're figuring it out as we go, and some new information becomes available that sometimes discourages us because we've been doing something we thought it would be sustainable, and then it somehow we find out it's not. I would say that don't worry about the disposal. You're also those students between the adolescence phase and the mid-20s, people are experimenting a lot, and it's normal to go through different outfits, to go through different clothes. This is when this intense consumption, this is a life phase of experimentation. So don't be too harsh on yourself if you want to try out a different outfit. But if you are getting this outfit, consider, instead of buying it new, consider getting it secondhand. Consider borrowing it from someone to try out. And if it doesn't work, don't do it. So in terms of acquisition, consider how to reduce your impacts, right? But in terms of disposal also, it's bound to happen. You will have to get rid of things. The best way to extend the garment's lifespan is to give it to someone who wants it. So either to give it to a friend, to give it at a garage sale. So when the garment is taken by someone who specifically wants that garment, rather than donating it in a closed bag to an organization that may not have the capacity to sort it. So to really extend it would be local reuse. A swap shop that we visited yesterday seems to be a great example of local recirculation of things. But eventually, as you progress, if you adopt the rule of five, by the way, there is a campaign on social media based on our research, it's called the rule of five. When the people are really experimenting to reduce the consumption of new things, you will see that the throughput, like what goes out, is actually becomes less and less and less. And then you would have less of this dilemma. And when you buy, also look at the materials. Would this biodegrade? In the worst case scenario, I really phased out all the things that were polyester or acrylic from my wardrobe somehow. It wasn't intentional. It was not that I was like demonizing them, but since 7 years, I barely have anything that is synthetic. And now I know if I am really, tired of my cotton or wool t-shirt, the worst case scenario, it will biodegrade. I can chop it up and I can put it in my compost. It's not going to kill my worms, and it's just going to, die peacefully, go back to nature. But if it's synthetics, then it won't. So when you're acquiring a new thing, even in swap shop, even in secondhand, think about what it is and what's going to happen to it at the end of life. And I will stop here.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, you guys are asking very good questions. It's like, have you prepared those for me? Because I've been thinking about them. For the secondhand, I've been comparing this. I've been using this metaphor for a while. If we imagine, in drug addiction, to treat a drug addiction, often people are given placebo to imitate the effect of the drug and then to gradually get off the drug, in medical terms. If we imagine or compare fast fashion to being a drug, which is something that's been causing addiction for many people, we become addicted to the dopamine that we get from this, instant gratification of buying things that are not expensive, or finding great treasures. If we compare fast fashion as being a drug, then secondhand fashion to me is a placebo. It's not the solution, it's not the final state, but it's a way to weave off people of this the needle of addiction to buying new, mostly plastic stuff. And buying secondhand is a way to move away from the high impact products to lower impact products, but it has the danger of transferring the mentality of fast fashion overconsumption to secondhand overconsumption. So we need to be very wary about this. And while we're transferring to secondhand, we need to also introduce the sufficiency logic, not just better, but less, even of secondhand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Drug-free is you buy much less overall. You just
No, because I really understand that struggle that if you start, you're like, oh, and then I'm gonna buy everything secondhand. But if you still continue buying, like you're saying, you're still buying a lot. So you're still very sensitive for trends, and you're still sensitive for constantly inventing yourself, which is great because you're experimenting and you're figuring out who am I. But I feel the ultimate goal would be that you figured out what your style is for a longer period of time. So then if you know your style, if you know what you feel good in, and you can buy specific items that you know you will wear for a very long time, then eventually you will not need as many outfits because you already have them in your closet. And then from there you can go one in, one out. But I think it really goes with experimenting, finding yourself, and then from there you don't need as much. You're sufficient.
And the case that you are already here and that you are already aware, that is your starting point. All start with awareness and to face what your attitude is to fashion.
Thank you. Yes, Jacob.
they won't. They won't, and then they won't because there are very strong monetary incentives for few people at play. And here I'm a glass half empty. I'm sorry, but I don't think that these companies inherently suddenly would change unless the leadership changes. We could see with the case of Patagonia, which is not perfect. Patagonia has its issues, but the leadership of that company, they just gave away a profit-oriented structure. They paid a lot of money to lawyers in the US because there wasn't even a structure that didn't exist, the legal structure to reformulate it, but they gave up on profits so that they could create a climate fund instead. So all the profits that would have otherwise gone to shareholders are now going to the climate fund to support conservation and climate projects. But this is one example. One example. How many companies exist, right? I think if we all have different positions. We all have. I come from, let's say, a really not wealthy background, so I understand the need to work to make a living. But at the same time, I worry that if your heart's in the right place and you join a company that's doing things that go against your values, at some point you will reach a burnout phase, and it will be very difficult. So try to be mindful of your mental health. Once you're going, you know where you're going. You know why you're doing it. Have your eyes on the prize. We all have different objectives, and for some, making a living at a given point and creating your life has more priority than broader altruistic concerns, let's say. And I understand this very well. But in the end of the day, each of us makes this decision for ourselves, and we all have different thresholds, how much we can last. But I have very little faith, unfortunately, in transformation from within of the large behemoths.
I think also that now we have the need also that we are carrying also the brands who are doing good. And like here in Amsterdam, New Optimist, there are several brands who are trying to shift the and to transform the fashion industry. And if we are now aware and we are carrying this kind of brands, and we are even if it's one item per year that when you buy and you buy it from them. There's a sporting brand they do only with organic cotton and hemp, because they also prove that polyester in sporting is not mandatory. So there are already changes going to happen if we support as a consumer these kind of brands. Then also the best way is to prove with your wallet. I remember a case in the 80s. Adidas in America was huge of sweatshirt for the high schools with this high school sweatshirt. The student community, they found out that there was child labor in Adidas, and together they say, no, we don't want to do it. And that made that Adidas went down. Okay, Nike went up, but that made also that this that the discussion about child labor in America came on topic to change, and then the Fair Labor Association started in that moment to help brands also to understand this. So if we are more powerful than we know. If we say, I don't want to buy fast fashion anymore, but when I buy something, I buy a sustainable brand, and that brand can grow by then, I think that will be very helpful, and not to find excuses why you have to buy an item from a fast fashion brand.
Thank you.
Quick addition to it, because I think it's hard to find your first job at a new company. We're in a transition, so we're not there yet. So these companies do still exist. They pay more money, but they have to pay more money because they don't add to your values, and that's a choice on where you wanna go. Both choices are good for yourself if you choose them very wisely. But also, for example, because I come from a environmental scientist background with geology, a lot of the students that I was in class with had the choice of, am I going to work for Shell or am I going to work for an innovative company? And back in the days, people would still pick Shell quite often because it wasn't, people weren't aware of how bad it was. The transition there has gone a little bit quicker. They started earlier on, so now no one from my study would go work for Shell because it doesn't fit your values anymore. So I feel that transition will happen within the fashion industry as well, but it's just not there yet. So it's hard. It's good to discuss it, but yeah, people still need work. You need to make money, but yeah, it's about your values and where you want to go.
There is no judgment there, by the way. There
None
is
at
no
all.
judgment
Yeah.
there. It's more, I would focus on mental health, because if there is a conflict of values, it will be felt by the person who's going through that conflict, not by the fast fashion brand.
Well, thank you. With this, I think we will round it off. Thank you so much all for coming here, and I hope you really enjoyed it and had some inspiring conversations. Yes, so thank you. Please give it up one last time. That's it, yeah.